I'm going to start recording now. And I want to thank you all for coming to our first director's desk. As I said in our e-blast, this is going to be a monthly series where you will be able to meet me, the director. I'm Brianna Treleven. Probably should have introduced myself from the beginning. And you have the opportunity to learn about some things going on behind the scenes here while our doors are closed, and ask me questions that you might have. So I just want to start out by giving a little bit about my background because I have not been able to meet many of our members due to, the situation this year. So I started at the Historical Society in January, and my background is mostly in collections at museums. So I came into this position with about 6 years of experience in various museums, history, art, different special collections. But my passion is really with collections. I just love objects and organizing them and cataloging them. So that is why I chose this topic for our first Director's Desk talk. So this is something that has not been made public yet, but our board and staff have been working on a strategic plan. Our last strategic plan was done in 2013, I believe, if I remember correctly. So it was definitely time for an update. And our original plans were to do it in the spring. That got put on hold when we had to close the museum. But we have been working on one this fall, and it will be made available to the public, hopefully in the beginning of next year. But we divided into 3 groups focusing on 3 particular areas. So there was community engagement, sustainability, and then preservation and access. And I'm on the preservation and access group along with Megan Hayes, who is the local history librarian at Shaker Heights Public Library, and Hazel Smith, who is our junior board member. So she is a 10th grader at Shaker Heights High School. So on that note of preservation and access, one of our top priorities has been an inventory of our collection. And it seems kind of obvious, like, why do you need an inventory? But it's not uncommon for old, small museums to have their collections become disorganized over time. Like, that is just the reality of having limited resources, limited funding, limited space. And we have been in existence for 73 years. So when you consider that over time, we have had a change in staff members, change in board, varying degrees of professional museum knowledge, our collections just kind of, they're cared for, but they're kind of all over the place. And we don't necessarily have one consistent inventory of our collections. So one of our top priorities has been to complete an inventory, and this will help us. It'll make it easier for us to curate exhibits so we can see what's in our collection. It'll make it easier for us to add to our collection. So we know, like, do we already have this? Is this something that's missing? And another very important thing is that it helps us address gaps in our collection. So for example, SHS was founded in 1947 to preserve the history of the Shakers, particularly the North Union Shakers who lived in this community. And so the bulk of our collection is related to the Shakers. Not surprising if you've ever been here. We have so many Shaker chairs and Shaker furniture, inventions, but we didn't really start collecting the history of Shaker Heights as a city until later in our history as an organization. And so, again, most of our collection is Shaker related. Then when you start collecting the history of Shaker Heights, it's very heavy on the Van Swearingen brothers. But we've noticed from starting this inventory that one of the big gaps in our collection is basically 1930s to present. And it's kind of weird to think of the present as being something that we collect, but the present will be history at some point. So we do want to collect stuff that is happening now, or objects that are being created now, things that commemorate current events. Obviously right now, like the pandemic, it's history. We're living through history right now. But as I said, it's 1930s to present is kind of lacking in our collection, particularly as it relates to women's history, Black history, or any community of color in Shaker Heights. We have very little of represented in our collection. So again, going back to the inventory, being able to identify those gaps will help us create a more well-rounded and comprehensive collection that tells the stories that truly represent Shaker Heights as a city. So to do our inventory, we have been using a program called Catalog It, which is a collections management program that is entirely cloud-based. So we don't have to download it on our computers. We can even access it from our phones, which is really nice. There's an app you can download. So I'm actually going to share that with you now. This is an exclusive behind the scenes look because this is not public yet. So this is Catalog It. And Hazel, as I mentioned, our junior board member, has been the one doing the bulk of the cataloging. So this will eventually be made public once we have more objects in here. As you can see at the bottom, we currently have 160. But the really nice thing is that we are going room by room, and as I said, you can access it on your phone. So just from our phone, Hazel will take a photo of the object and then add very basic information. So there's an idea in archival work that's called more product, less process, which basically is just, the idea that you want to add make as much accessible as possible without spending too much time on it. And that's what we're doing now. So this record is by no means complete. It's just the basics, but it's enough that when we do make it public, the public, you could search our collection and you could see what we have. You would be able to provide a number if you said, oh, I'm interested in learning more about this object. The accession number is up in the corner, so you'd be able to identify it. And one of the very important things with this is that we note the location, because it's not helpful to know what you have if you don't know where it is, if you can't find it. So this, as I said, has been a big project for Hazel. She's been coming in approximately 3 days a week for about a month to work on this. And as we do exhibits, the other nice thing, let's find an exhibit object. Okay, so these saddlebags. This is a bit more fleshed out in terms of an object record, because this is currently in our Shaker's Attic exhibit. So we did a bit more research on this one. I took some nicer photos of the objects and included more photos. So you have it from various angles, and we also were able to include an exhibition history, which is really nice because you always want to know, like, well, was this in a recent exhibit? We don't want to show it so soon, and this will give us a way to keep track of all of that. And as I said, the nice thing is location. So you can have a permanent location, a temporary location if things get moved, so you can put it back where you found it. If you're anything like me, as soon as I move something, I forget where it originally went. So this really helps us out. And having that short description helps us also identify the object. If for some reason, like, it didn't have photos, we would hopefully be able to connect them. So stop sharing for now. So yeah, so as I said, this catalog is really nice. I feel like it's the real collections nerd in me that I'm extremely excited about it, and I'm really excited to share it with the public. While our doors are closed, it's really hard to accommodate researchers. And so our hope is that as we add more to the collection, we will be able to fulfill research requests by linking to objects that are in there, that researchers will be able to just find the information they're looking for directly in the catalog, or again, provide the number, and then we can do more research on our end. But it also helps teachers and students in the area. You know, Shaker Heights heavily participates in History Day, and we unfortunately were not able to have students researching this year. So our hope is that having this online, again, hopefully in like a month or two, when we have added more objects, will really make it accessible to more people, literally all around the world, which is a really exciting concept. And as I mentioned, we do have gaps in our collection. And so being able to see what we have and fill in those gaps visually, like as you're looking through, I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of that stuff was just Shaker related. Very little of it was even related to the Van Swearingens. So the 2 rooms that we have been doing processing are very much focused on the Shakers. And so this will help us guide our collecting practices and the kind of objects that we seek out and accept into the collection. And I also want to bring up, kind of on that note of collecting, that we do get emails from people who want to donate objects. And so I would highly recommend, like, if there is an object you want to donate, there is a history of, among all historical societies, of people just kind of leaving stuff on steps or the back door. And I ask that you not do that, just because we do need to have you fill out some paperwork legally. So if there's an object that you would like to donate, please send me an email. My email is just director@shakerhistory.org. You can send an email with a description and some photos, and that'll help me better assess the object and determine whether it's a good fit for our collection. And we do have a collections management policy that helps dictate what we collect. So it might depend, like, whether we accept your object, it depends on whether it fits, you know, what we collect. So if you want to donate something related to Columbus, Ohio, we might not accept that because it doesn't really fit in with our mission. We also will not accept something if we feel we cannot properly care for it, or if we just don't have the space for it. So just for example, like, I know another local historical society that got donated an entire kitchen. If somebody wanted to donate a kitchen to us, we would not be able to fit that anywhere. And we would have to, unfortunately, turn that down, even though that sounds really cool. And then lastly, if we already have duplicates in our collection, we might not accept your object. So if you want to donate something and we ultimately say no, please don't take it personally. It's not because your object does not have value. It's just that, you know, it does not fit our collecting practices. So now that we kind of have those basics out of the way, I wanted to do a bit of a show and tell. As I said, doing this inventory, you come across stuff where you didn't really know, especially for me, since I'm so new, I didn't know that we had, because it's not in any kind of inventory or record currently. So I'm gonna, let's see, move my laptop back, put on my gloves. So we wear gloves just to help protect the objects, because your hands and fingers have oils in them that will degrade objects. So as you know, we wear these to protect this stuff. So the first thing that I want to show is these saddlebags, which, let's see if we can get a good view of this. I had shown you in the collection database already, but these are in our current exhibit, Shaker's Attic. They are from the early 1900s, and we don't know exactly who they belong to. The record just indicates that they belong to an early doctor in Warrensville Township. And even though there are some, I mean, it's quite dusty. There is some disintegration, some leather. You get a little red rot where the leather starts to disintegrate and it turns red. But in general, it's very well preserved. Like, it still opens up. There's nothing inside anymore, but it would have carried tools and medicines. You know, in the early days, the doctors made house calls on their horses. And so that's what this would have been used for. And it's also kind of hard to see in this particular photo or in this video, but we do have a photo of it on the Shaker's Attic website, and you might be able to see it a little better here, but there's actually this beautiful leather work. This is a little less dusty area, so you might be able to see it better. But all over this, there's like little flowers and patterns, and it's just really beautiful. And so this, I think, is one of the coolest things that we've come across as we've been exploring our collection. I just think that, you know, once again, the idea that this was used to travel around to care for people is really cool, and that it's still very well preserved. So I think that this is possibly my favorite object in the current exhibit. And again, if you have any questions, I'll come back. If you have any questions or comments as I'm talking, feel free to add it to the chat. But then one of the other things that we came across as we were doing the inventory is this gentleman, this framed image. His name is Dr. Sisley, and he was one of the early doctors in Warrensville Township in the early 1900s. And we have no way of knowing whether currently whether the bags belong to him. But the great thing about doing this inventory is that as we find more objects and catalog them, that we're able to make these connections. So we know we have Dr. Saddlebags, and we know we have this image of Dr. Sisley. So we can do further research to try to figure out whether those saddlebags belong to him, which is a cool connection. And as we were clearing out one of the rooms to process objects, we also came across, there's a lot of glare on this glass in particular, so I'm going to hold it at an angle, but it is an old photograph of our museum, which was originally owned by Lewis Myers. It was built by Reamer Architecture in 1910. But it's just a fascinating photo because of all of the empty space around the house. Like, I don't know if you can see on any of the sides, but it just feels so vast and open because this would have been one of the first houses in Shaker Heights. And it's also interesting, I'm gonna have to do a little more research on this, but the address that is at the bottom is not our current address. So I have not found anything in our records that mentions this address. It says 3272 South Park, and right now our address is 16740. And so it's interesting, you know, as more houses were built and the land was developed, that the address system probably changed over time. But there really isn't any identifying mark on the frame. There could be something on the back of the photo, but we're not removing it right now. I'm guessing that this photo was probably taken when the house was built in 1910. And I have not personally seen any photos from this early. So I was very excited when we saw this because, you know, the house was donated to the Historical Society in 1969. So it really is one of our greatest collection objects, I guess you could say, one of our greatest donations. But it's also interesting, like this side here is currently some of our offices. So there was an addition added at some point. I believe it might have been in the 1940s. But again, just seeing the house kind of on this vast empty land is really interesting because now we're surrounded by trees. So, and other houses, we have neighbors now. But I really enjoyed this photo. And we might actually, now that I found that, and the Myers Mansion is featured in our current exhibit, so I might try to digitize that photo and upload it to the digital exhibit. And then the last thing I want to show, I'm actually taking my gloves off for this because it's paper. I washed my hands beforehand. So this is just a little collection thing that when you're handling paper, the gloves make it harder to actually feel the pages and everything. So you're more likely to accidentally rip a page if you're wearing gloves. So they recommend that you actually just wash your hands before touching paper. You still want to be very delicate with it. But we get a lot of image and research requests, especially for whatever reason at the end of this year when we reclosed our doors in November. We just got a huge influx of image requests, and it usually requires a lot of digging in our archives and collections, which is a great way to discover things and for me to learn about what we have in our collection. But somebody wanted an image that is from the Shaker Village East of Center Road booklet. So this is currently in our library. We have a couple of copies. It was published in 1929, but it was an early Van Swearingen, here's the title page, if you can see that, early Van Swearingen Company promotional book to advertise the land that was between Warrensville Center, which at the time was just known as Center Road, Warrensville Center and Richmond. So it's a very small book, but it has these beautiful illustrations that show different houses and areas. They're trying to promote the fact that if you move to that land, you will be around private schools and golf courses and like all of the luxuries that come with living in that area. Like it mentions university and Laurel schools. As I said, there are a lot of houses. And the fun thing about this is that the request that we got was actually a Shaker Heights resident recognized their house in it. And so they wanted that image, so they were able to print a larger version of it to hang at home. Here's a map of the area. And as you can see, this is just a tiny booklet. It was just a promotional booklet. But it is interesting too to keep in mind, so this page, this talks about restrictions and how you will have kind of the highest quality of living because of these restrictions. But it's important to remember that the Van Swearingen Company did have restrictions, not, they weren't overt restrictions, like they didn't blatantly say this, but they did have restrictions that prevented African Americans and Jews from buying property in Shaker Heights. And there's actually, I'm going to link to it in the chat if you're interested in learning more about that. There's a great article by Virginia Dawson that talks about that. And so again, like the booklet mentions restrictions as being a selling point, but at the time, Jews still were kind of prevented from buying land in that area. So it's you know, again, the restrictions they don't blatantly say that like Jews and African Americans can't buy the land, but the restrictions that they imposed prevented them from buying it. So it's one of those things that we try to keep in mind as we interpret the objects we have in our collection, is that the early history of Shaker Heights, like many cities, is very white. But we know that Shaker Heights does have a very diverse history, and we want that better represented in our collection. And that's something that we are focusing on moving forward, is trying to better represent other stories in our collection. So that is all I have related to collections right now. There are a couple more things that I want to talk about, but does anyone have any questions specifically about collections or our collecting practices? Feel free to add it in the chat. And I'll wait just a little bit to see if anything comes up. And if not, I will move on. Okay, so I hope that was informative and gave you a little idea of what we are doing while our doors are closed and what we are excited to bring to you and to the public in the coming months. I also wanted to mention just some things about the museum in general, not necessarily related to the collections, but we we've had some questions about whether you will be getting an annual fund letter, and the answer is yes. Unfortunately, we just don't know when, because there were some delays with the printer. There are delays with the mail. We did our best to get it out in like early December, and that did not happen. So I do, if in case you're wondering at all about the annual fund, there will be a letter going out. You will receive a letter. We hope that it will be this year, but it's out of our hands now. This year has just been a lesson in going with the flow. I'm going to share my screen though and just show that if you are eager to contribute in 2020 and you're nervous about whether the letter is going to arrive on time, at our website, which is just shakerhistory.org, we do have a page for the annual fund where you can donate online. So like I said, I know some people are eager to get in their 2020 contributions. You're also welcome, if you prefer to pay by check, you're welcome to mail a check to us with a note that says it's for the annual fund. Even though our doors are closed, we do check, we stop by the museum frequently to check mail, make sure nothing's sitting in our mailbox for too long. So that is one way to donate if you wish. And while I am on the website, I also want to talk about some upcoming programs that we have. So coming up over students' winter break, we have a mini camp. It's entirely virtual that's called Science That Rocks. And it is based largely off of our successful virtual Shaker Dig over the summer. But that registration closes tomorrow. So if you know of kids or families that are looking for something fun to do over their winter break, please pass this along so they can register tomorrow at the latest. And we also have a winter competition that's taking place now through March. We had one over the summer involving a coloring contest that was really fun. We loved seeing all of the pages that were colored by kids in the community. So this one is called Shaker Scenes, and we are asking that people create just short 10-second videos of what Shaker Scenes means to them this winter. So it could be building a snowman or sledding, maybe making snow angels, whatever people feel is their winter Shaker scene, the perfect winter Shaker scene. Please submit it. You can either send us the file or tag us on social media, which would be preferable, so then we can share it with everyone else. And there's more information, as I said, on our website under programs and events. Our History Making Homes tour, it's just a driving tour that is still available. It actually gets downloaded quite frequently, so we're very thrilled about that. But that is also a nice thing to do, possibly if if you're looking for something to do around the holidays. And then in 2021, which it's kind of crazy to me how we're already almost into 2021, we have 3 programs currently scheduled. So the first one is a virtual talk about curating our current exhibit, Shaker's Attic. That will be with myself and then our junior board member, Hazel Smith. Hazel really was the curator for this, which is amazing. As again, she's a 10th grader. And so I'm really excited to talk with her about what her experience was like curating from the initial idea to finally installing the exhibit. So that will be on January 9th at 1 p.m. And it's just going to be on our social media, and we'll also upload the file to our YouTube page in case you don't have social media, you don't have Facebook, and you still want to watch it. On January 23rd, we have Museum Methods for Home Collections, but the digital version. So we had a preservation workshop in November that focused on caring for your physical objects. And this one will be focusing on caring for your digital objects. So, you might have a lot of digital files at home, digital photographs, or stuff that you want to digitize. And this workshop will help you get a better sense of what that entails, how you can do it on a budget, basically. And again, that will be on our Facebook page, but we can also upload it to YouTube. And then the only other thing we currently have scheduled is a presentation by Debbie Weinkammer, The Courtship and Marriage of James and Lucretia Garfield. We were actually supposed to offer this in 2020, but due to COVID, we had to postpone it. I'm really hoping that we can gather by April. This program is very much dependent on being able to gather because she is performing as Lucretia Garfield. And so it does not quite have the same effect virtually as in person. So it is possible that this will get postponed once again, but for right now, we are hoping to be able to host it at the museum in April. And the last thing that I wanted to share was just that we will be having our annual meeting on January 31st. It's a Sunday. We're still working out some details. It will be virtual, but if you are interested in attending that, add January 31st to your calendar. And it will most likely be in the afternoon. I know in 2020, it was from 3 to 5. It'll probably be around the same, but it'll be virtual, it'll be safe. We're gonna have a speaker and you can attend in your pajama bottoms and no one will ever know. So we hope to see you there. And once again, I wanna thank you for coming to the first Director's Desk Talk. If you have any ideas for what you want me to discuss in the future, feel free to send me an email. I would love to hear what you guys want me to talk about because as I said, I love collections, which is why I picked this, but I also want to discuss topics that you care about as well. So I hope that you have a wonderful afternoon and happy holiday, happy New Year, and we hope to see you at our future virtual events. Thank you.